Here, hold on. It's asking me to continue. I'm consenting to be recorded. Okay.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Kennel Podcast. I'm Foxhound, and I'm joined here today with a modern FMA and stick fighting pioneer, the craftiest of dogs, the guiding force of the Dog Brothers, Marc Denny. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Woof woof. Memorial Sunday, 2021.
Well, really appreciate really appreciate you being here. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what got you started in the martial arts.
Well, who I am, that's either a large or a short one answer. But what got me, let's just simply start with how I got started in martial arts. I'm 68 and I grew up in New York City. So if you do the math as to what years I was growing up, New York City was a very violent place, and a lot of street crime, a lot of mugging, and so forth. And so there was just in my, teen year, my younger years, a lot of, not extreme violence, but, violent episodes, criminal episodes in my life that got me thinking in a certain way. And so my last year of law school, I was at, here, let me jump back. I was between college and law school. I was graduated from college in December. So I had a semester open before going to law school. And I'd been spending a lot of time down in Mexico during the time that I dropped out of college and working on my Spanish. And so I wanted to improve my Spanish. And so through a friend of mine down in Mexico, we arranged for me to spend a semester in a Mexican law school. I took just 2 courses, but the idea was not for any formal degree or anything, but just to work on taking my Spanish from pretty good tourist to something resembling an adult level. And so the school I got into was School of the Children of the Elite. Like one of my best friend there, his uncle was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the class that I had dinner with the guy. He was an alcoholic, by the way. And, there were 2 children of governors in my class, so it was a very serious, very plugged in school. And afterwards, one of my friends and I, we went down to southern Mexico, and we went, just sort of on a general adventure kind of a trip, and we wound up in Chiapas, Mexico, which is the state that borders Guatemala. And some of you may know my story about we picked up these 2 blonde American girls, and they were dressed in a way that by local criteria meant they were hookers. And 4 of the locals had been drinking, and they tried dragging off the girl with my buddy, and there was a fight. We ran to the police station. The cop on duty ran away, and there was another fight there. And somehow we wound up in the state prison for 3 days. And
no good deed goes unpunished.
Oh yeah, it was pretty hysterical. The cop was a transit cop, and so we ran up to him, and they had broken off from us, down the street, saying, "Vamos al coche por la pistola." Let's go to the car and get the pistol. And so we ran to the cops, and we said, "These guys after us," and they have a gun. And we didn't realize he was a transit cop, which meant all he had was a screwdriver. Transit cops, what they do to enforce the parking is they remove your license plate. When you come back to your car, they sell it back to you. So he didn't have a gun. So when they showed up, he ran away, and there's another fight there, and we barricaded ourselves in the police station. They're trying to come break in through the front door, and we're climbing out the back window as the police arrive and forced to see us climbing out the back window. And they knew the guys because they were from town. And so we got thrown in the state prison for 3 days. And, so with that, I came out of that experience saying, I really need to know something about being able to fight for real. Mm-hmm. And so my last semester of law school, so it was about 3, there was a class in the gym, Sifu Paul Vizio of Fujao Pai, Tiger Claw Kung Fu. At the time, he was the US PKA champion. He went on to be the world PKA champion. So martial arts at that point was in the transition from point tournament karate stuff as being the testing ground to, where like you could get knocked out, the PKA thing, boxing gloves, and it had the
long pants, no shirt, Chuck Norris style.
Yes, and the taekwondo booties on the feet. So Muay Thai had not made its presence known.
Yeah.
So that's where it was in the evolution. It wasn't, it wasn't quite what I was looking for, but it was the best thing, that seemed available. And after I graduated, I went down to Washington and was working as a lawyer, and there was a Jun-Ri school down there. So I did some of the Jun-Ri Taekwondo and made it to Greenbelt.
Excellent.
And, but yeah, it still wasn't what I was looking for, but, best use I could make of my time. And when I got out to LA, I was living in Long Beach, and which is not a very good beach because there's a breakwater and it's there for the harbor, which is the largest port on the west coast of the Western Hemisphere, so kind of industrial. And but there was this guy during the day, he's practicing on the beach, obviously martial art movements. I went over and said, "Hey, can I watch?" I watch. He says, "Hey, that looks cool. What are you doing?" And he says very mysteriously, it's a modified Wing Chun. And I said, "Oh, I've heard of Wing Chun. That sounds kind of cool." And so I said, "Well, I'm new to, just moved out here." And so he told me about the Kali Academy. And I'd never heard of Kali, but, I liked this movement. It sounded interesting. And so I got to the Kali Academy, which was Guro and Sifu Richard Bastillo. And I think it was Western Avenue and sort of the more industrial part of Torrance, or, anyway, near the harbor. And I walked in there and there's people waving around sticks and knives. There's a Muay Thai fighter. I'd never seen Muay Thai. There's, this little Thai guy with calves the size of my thighs wailing on a Muay Thai bag. I'd never seen that. Blew my Taekwondo mind. Mm-hmm. And I said, clearly I have found what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. Because I was not about, the bully kicking sand in my face at the beach, or, I was not about what I've come to call, the term I've come to use is young male ritual hierarchical combat. Yep. What a lot of martial arts is about. I was about like, I remember those three junkies chasing me on the subway platform at 3 a.m. after I dropped Yolanda off in the North Bronx. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about that 4-on-2 fight, in Mexico and Chiapas that got me thrown in prison for 3 days. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking about a different kind of a problem. And so to have an art that was based on, that included the realities of weapons, made sense to me. And I've been, I looked into it a bit, and I discovered Guro Nasano's book, The Filipino Martial Arts, and the essays that begin it in there about the old masters, particularly one about Punong Lacosta, where he was, as a man in his 80s, there were teenagers bothering old people in the neighborhood. And, he went for a walk until he met up with these teenagers and gave them an education. They thought they were going to mess with the old man, and they came away with it with a, maybe we better think about living differently kind of a life experience. And so the idea of walking as a warrior for all your days appealed to me deeply. And so I started at the Kali Academy, and that's where I met a guy by the name of Paul Vunak, who was very articulate about trapping and
well-known figure in Filipino martial arts.
Yeah, so that was a wild and lively time. Paul's very talented. We didn't part on very good terms, but for about 3 years we were very close. And along the way there, I've been, reading about the death matches in the Philippines. And one day, Bill Gay and Chris Marcus came into class, and they were covered with humongous bruises, black and blue and green and yellow. And, says, good God, what happened, man? He says, oh, we were stick fighting. And I was like, stick fights, they weren't dead. So I was really confused. Death matches,
They weren't dead.
And so naturally, I said, what happens? Well, we met this guy and we were sparring in the park. And I said, well, you're going to do it again? He says, oh, yeah. He says, well, bring me along with you the next time. I want to watch. And that's how I met Eric Knaus, who was to become top dog of the Dog Brothers. And, my intention was just to watch. But Eric, being the very clever salesman that he can be, he talked me into going out there, and he tells the story of my first fight against Chris Marcus somewhere in the first series. And for me, that made a lot of sense, as to be my testing ground for operating in the adrenal state. Because Muay Thai was coming in, the Inosanto Academy was very much on the cutting edge with that. But, at that point, I was already in my mid 30s and, getting involved in, a combat ring sport like that, just, like how long could I do it, particularly, with the late start. I didn't start martial arts until I was 29 or 30. And, by the time this came about, it was, somewhere in mid 80s, I'm going to guess around 84. And, so, the stick fighting definitely was a high adrenaline rush, and it interfaced with what Vunak had been advocating about stick fighting teaching, being a very good foundation for trapping. And I was very taken up with his theories on trapping. And so that's how Eric and I got started. And it turned out that he also had gone to Columbia. He was in the undergrad. He had been on the football team there. And we, in addition to stick fighting, he very gifted hand reader, not the gypsum fortune telling method, but a different method. And it was, I took it up as a way of picking up girls. And you would hold their hand and you'd look at the hand and go, and then you would peer into her face and, why? And then I'd go, this even before I really knew how to do it, why? And I'd look at her and I'd say in my most sensitive voice, I bet a lot of men have tried to take advantage of you. And it would either get that reaction as and one's trying right now, or like the other one would be, how did you know? And so, it was one, so I was also very much into psychology, particularly Jungian psychology, and Eric's method. Each finger represented a different archetype of personality. And so it interfaced with the Jungian method of analysis. And so I could take an hour reading a girl's hand, and mostly it was a conversation about her favorite subject, herself. And, just what a wonderful way to, see if, decide whether this is somebody you want to ask out, and so forth. And so, anyway, but, so.
Did you find that was weird to do with men, so you decided to fight them instead to get to know them?
Well, no, I didn't do it with men very much, but I'm just saying that's, Eric was really good at it with men or women.
Yeah.
And, so, our Eric, my friendship with Eric was based on much more than, just the stick fighting. I mean, to this day, we'll pick up the phone and we'll shoot the breeze on, geopolitics for an hour or something, so it, so it's, broad and deep friendship. And Eric was way ahead of me as a fighter and physically, he could have broken me early if he had operated out of ego. And I had parted ways with Vunak, and I'd been Vunak's business partner. I mean, if you look at the original paperwork for Progressive Fighting Systems, I'm a 1/3 partner along with his then girlfriend, Brenda Temple. And I had brought together him with Joe Jennings of Panther Productions, and we did the, Paul did the Jeet Kune Do series and that's the first time anybody could use Jeet Kune Do. Guro gave permission. And, so I was able to go back to Joe Jennings at Panther and say, I got this guy, Eric Knausen, we made you a lot of money with the JKD series, and, want to do this series, based around Eric. And, Joe says, stick fighting. And I said, no, I'll tell you, Paul was just a guy teaching in the alley behind his house until I brought him to you, and, look at all the money we made you, so, we negotiated things and worked things out. And that was the beginning of, I brought Eric with me up to the Inosanto Academy because Guro Inosanto knew him through Grand Tuangahe, Guro Inosanto and Grand Tuangahe being very close. And so, Eric was free to jump in the senior class with me. And, so that was around 86. And so around 88 is when I went to Joe Jennings at Panther and organized the shoot that was going to became the bulk of the footage around which the first series was based. And so that's how that came together. And so, just one thing led to another. I sort of, am I talking too long on this? I'm just.
No, keep going.
And so we accumulated footage for a few years. And then in summer of 1990, I connected with the Machado brothers in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I had first gotten wind of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu through Vunak in 86, but well, I want to avoid commentary there, but that door wasn't open for me at that time.
Gotcha.
But I made note that this is something I want to pursue. So, through Inisano Academy friend Chris Howder, who's now a 5th degree under Higgin Machado, he introduced me to the 5 Machado brothers who were teaching together out of their garage in that summer of '90. And I brought that experience to the Dog Brothers fighting, and it gave me, good results. And it also is where the trapping finally made more sense. It's hard to believe in the trapping that I'd work with Vunak if you don't have grappling skills, because trapping is very much about crashing and aggression. And, a lot of times it's going to get tied up. And if you don't know what happens there, then, you're not going to really want to crash. And so that was summer of 1990 that I first used it. That can be seen in the first series in tape 5. And a few months after that, the director that I had brought in for Vunak's first JKD tape, the one that helped open the door with Panther Productions, was a guy who had been on SEAL Team 6 and introduced by my brother's sister, my brother's wife, who knew him from a movie set where he had been a grip or a gaffer or something, and he was an aspiring director. And so he had done that video. And so I introduced Eric and him, and so he told his friends on SEAL Team 6 about us, and they sent 2 guys out to spar with Eric and me to see if we were worthy. And so they then brought us out to the base at Virginia Beach, and some of that footage can be seen in the first series. And we brought Higgin Machado along with us, and so that's where that connection began for the Machado brothers. And so it was awesome with Higgin, because no one, so this is February of 1991. So this was during the run up to the first Gulf War. So, things are ramping up, machine gun nests with, sandbags at the front gate, adrenaline is high, and, here's SEAL Team 6 kind of chomping at the chomping at the bit to get ready. And so Higgin gets out there, and Higgin was about 180 at that time. And this is, so no one had seen Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or knew what it was, because like still 2 years before the UFC. Right. And he says, "Oh, what's your favorite position? Here, why don't you take that on me, and we'll begin there." And so he so for everybody who was there, he went through the whole team twice without cracking a sweat. And the next day they brought in their alpha gorilla, and who actually had a wrestling background. And so I said to Higgin that this is the guy they're bringing to really test you. You need to win here. And they rolled. It took them a bit longer, but here's a guy with a chest like an oil drum, and orangutan arms, and these guys in SEAL Team 6 are seriously formidable. Seriously formidable. Sure. This was the sort of the final days of the guys that Dick Marcinko had brought in, the team that Marcinko had, so people who follow these things will recognize that name. Yep. And so he was gone for what, the reasons that he got in trouble. I have no opinion there as to what that was about, but, this was, the tailwinds of the original team. So serious players, and powerful experience in my life, and, for Eric too, and for Higgin. And, so it was, when would that be? Then it was in the fall of '92, training in jiu-jitsu and warm-ups. And this guy was 6'7", instead of while sweeping my leg as part of the warm-ups into a judo throw, he accidentally stepped on my foot while he swept the leg, and my knee went out sideways. And so the ACL, the PCL, and the lateral collateral ligaments were all snapped in half. And so it took 3 surgeries to replace them with Achilles tendons from cadavers. And so while I was doing that, that's when I edited the footage. And this was pre-digital days. So I'm working on a prosumer SVHS editing system. So anytime I made a change, everything after it had to be redone. Yep. And, so while I'm going through those 3 surgeries, so it's probably a process of about 9 months is when I edited the first series. And, I like, the fact that it's still selling, I think I must have done a pretty good job. And, I had Eric to work with, and
available digitally on dogbrothers.com, by the way.
Yes, thank you very much. And so with that, when it finally came out, I guess that would be 93. That then became a tremendous recruiting tool for us. And, one of our reasons in doing that was in the beginning, it was kind of a thing, just the usual suspects getting together. And you don't want to have too much, that kind of leads to inbreeding.
Yep.
And, so we were looking for more playmates, and, a lot of people like stick fighting. Isn't that what they did in the death matches in the Philippines? We don't want to die in it. So it was very hard to find playmates. And, but as people could start seeing it, and I think the Dog Brother philosophy, the Dog Brother message, and how we went about it, really resonated with a lot of people. The no judges, no referees, no judges, no trophies, no referees, friends at the end of the day. One rule only, be friends at the end of the day. I think that resonated with a lot of people who were looking for a way to develop themselves and test themselves without getting into the hierarchical ego BS of that so much of combat sport can get tangled up in. Like if you're not that level of athlete, or if it doesn't appeal to you, like you are that level of athlete, but you just don't want to get, like, oh, well, I lost, and so now I'm eliminated from the climb in the hierarchy. Just none of that is part of the Dog Brother thing. And because you're not expected to be carried out on your shield, you're not wasting IQ for the amusement of the crowd. And it's like, okay, I'm rocked here. Let me call it. No one's going to go, oh, you're a pussy. And so, so as the word spread, because Joe placed the picture of our ad, Eric's looming over me to smash me. It was very unmartial arty, and the visceral message that the picture conveyed. People, it was right next to the order form, buy 5, get 1 free. And then later on, buy 4, get 1 free. And this is before the internet really had come on stream. And so Panther was the dominant commercial force supporting the martial art magazines. So they have 4 pages, 6 pages, 8 pages of advertising in every magazine. So if you were in the Panther ad, and there we were next to the order form, see brutal stick fighting matches, Joe Jennings being the marketing, guy that he was. People, so for that freebies, people started going, well, I'm curious about this, for my freebie, I'll get this Dog Brothers thing. And, so word started to spread and things started to build, and that's how it got going. And so if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and so I'm assuming most of the people that are going to be listening to this know who the Dog Brothers are. But beyond that, I think some people aren't entirely sure about the difference between the Dog Brothers as an entity and what you've created in the Dog Brother martial arts. What point did DBMA kind of begin to become its own separate system from
the
other question. Things you've learned?
Yeah, good question. I from time to time, I write these pieces called Rambling Ruminations. And one of them is called Who's Your Teacher? And I talk about how Guro Nisano asked me to fill in for him while he was on the road a few times. And after one of the classes, somebody came up to me and said, who's your teacher? And I said, Guro Nisano. And he says, really? Because I am not the guy that Guro Nisano is going to call on to demonstrate, what he does.
Right.
But on the other hand, I'd be nothing without what he's taught me. And, so because people were coming to me to help prepare them to fight, the Dog Brother gathering. And so it would have, if I said I'm teaching Inasano blend, because it wasn't really Inasano blend. I mean, for me it was. But in terms of, like if someone hears the name Inasano blend and they're not going to get from me what they think they're going to get when they ask for Inasano blends. That makes sense?
Absolutely.
And so I, said, okay, this is Dog Brother martial arts. And so that's probably around 95. And, that I formally declared, this is a system, haha, I am the Grandmaster Poobah, whatever. And as, as years started going by, the logic of Kali is a very subtle and deep and broad logic. And I say it developed in me. There was a conversation. Do you know my story about Don Pentecost?
Uh, I think I do the knife story, but go ahead and tell it.
Yeah. So there was a booklet that was become an underground classic called "Put 'Em Down, Take 'Em Out: Knife Fighting Techniques from Folsom Prison." And so I'm working from memory here. I'm going to say it was a booklet about 60 pages long, half of which about why martial arts is stupid and clueless. And this is how it's really done in prison. And here, so here you take a bunch of magazines and you make some body armor with them, so in case you get very prison kind of an orientation. And there was a guy by the name of Peyton Quinn who wrote a insightful book called The Bouncer's Guide to Barroom Brawling, and he was
I've got a copy of it.
Yeah. I'd say the psychological insights are some of the most valuable. There's good martial arts in there too, but it's really about psychological insights. And he and I had been in correspondence because I had bought some of his VHS videos, Knockout Secrets from the Bouncer Trade. And, and the check is on Dog Brothers Martial Arts. And so he's like, Dog Brothers, what's that? We've been going back and forth a bit. And so he was doing a 5-day camp in LA. And so he invited me to come by to see their closing exercise. And he was the guy who developed what has now become the Red Man suit. But it was more like, okay, this is a motorcycle helmet with some padding on it. And now we've improvised a catcher's throat guard, for protecting the throat. And there's some body, so it was, sort of a lot of improvised stuff. But the idea was that the person being attacked could tee off with the street fighting techniques. You could do the eye jab because the eyes were really protected. You could do this, the throat shot because there was the protection there. You could kick the groin because the protection was there. And he had some very skilled attackers who knew how to play the psychological game. If they were working with a woman, they talk about like, yeah, my buddies and I were going to have a sperm races to see who impregnates you. And, like touch the deepest things in the woman.
Those
really,
soft skills are stuff that people don't necessarily think of. If you're not used to someone talking shit to you, it can be very uncomfortable.
Yes. And so Peyton's thought, and I think it's a very insightful one, is that if you don't understand what it is to operate in the adrenal state, you can develop technical skills and still not fight worth a damn. Because everyone knows for the reactions to danger of fight or flight, but there's actually used to be 5, but I've added 1 to it. In my thinking, there's 6 responses. There's fight, flight, freeze, which is what most people do because they're just overwhelmed by the dumper, just like, I can't believe this. There's no need to fight here. And they just freeze. Fight, flight, freeze, posture. Who do you think you're messing with? Where you try and puff yourself. It could be a bluff or it could be a prelude to an actual fight. These you can move between these. Fight, flight, freeze, posture. So fight, flight, freeze, posture. Submit, you can give up. That's a possible response. And the one that I've added, and is to placate. Hey man, calm down. We don't need to do this. And so these are the reactions. And so, his insight was that if you can't tap into the adrenal dump, and with these guys talking the way that they were talking to these people, even though they knew it was an exercise, they were experiencing a real adrenal jump. And in the case of the woman, the language just, gave there. And it was a very powerful experience for these people. So it's very insightful training that he was giving these people. And his feeling was once you had gone through that, now you could train martial art techniques because you understood the conditions, your inner state that you were going to have to be operating in. And so there was this big burly guy next to me. And I turned to him, I said, what do you think? And he's watching for a minute and he's sort of rubbing his chin for a moment. And he says, I get it. These people are the victims. And it was kind of like that ad that they used to have, that you have somebody attacking somebody and what would you do next? And everybody, the idea is most people are going to say, well, I blocked this. And, and it's like, well, why are you assuming that you are the person being attacked?
Right.
Why are you assuming that you weren't on the initiative? So he was looking at it from the point of view of the attacker. Whereas, the typical martial art student practitioner is going to be looking at it from the point of view of the person being attacked. And he says, I get it. These people are the victims. And so I said, hi, Marc, Denny. And we shake hands. He's got big, thick forearms, thick wrists, big hands. He says, hi, Don Pentecost. And I realized I'm talking to the Don Pentecost of put him down, take him out, knife fighting techniques from Folsom Prison. And so after the camp came to a close, Peyton and I went to a local coffee shop, and we had a conversation 2.5, 3 hours long. And it's a sort of feeling out process at the beginning of it. And, after things warmed up, got to the point where I could actually ask him, I said, well, what techniques did you use? And his breathing changes. He's remembering. And he picks up a fork or a spoon off the table, and he says, technique? There's no technique. You steel yourself up, you pump him until he's dead, and then you bind your wounds. And that was a moment of satori for me. And I said, I need to filter everything that I have learned from Guro and the other Filipino teachers to which, Guro introduced me through this filter, that this big, powerful guy is just going to be coming at me. And I think of the footage of Dogzilla and the first Die Less Often DVD, where he's coming at the camera indicating, he's federal corrections officer, for those who don't know. Just sheer powerful adrenal aggression. And I realized, I'm not ready to handle that. My dog brother stick fighting had already put me through the process of, well, if I can't believe that, if I haven't tested my roof block, if I haven't built up to where I know that my roof block can handle somebody coming at me with a caveman strike, what have I got? Like first thing you're going to see is the caveman, Mongo smash. And so, but if I know I can believe my roof block, all kinds of doors and portals open from that. And so I applied that same mental process in that same developmental mind that the dog brother experience had taught me to the concept of somebody coming at me with a knife in a prison sewing machine. And that was the beginning of the Die Less Often material. So this is the next step in the development of dog brother martial arts. And then somewhere in these years here, late 90s, there was a big feud in the way of the internet that took place on Guro Asano's forum. It was, where's the trapping? And there, there was this giant thread. It was like 200 pages long, and tens of thousands of reads, and everybody typing furiously. And somebody said, hey, Marc, you got to come over, because Guro Asano's people are having a hard time answering this guy. And so I went over there, and there was a whole conversation. And one of the sub themes in that conversation was, well, why, the claim of the Filipino martial arts that the empty hands are like the movements of the weapons. And so someone's saying, well, why don't we see it in the cage? And, so a lot of guys, well, this is too deadly. I'd poke them in the eye. I'd slap them in the balls. And, and they're going like, everybody, like I can poke,
Yeah.
Because as part of the first response to the UFC in '99, a lot of the striking systems were looking really bad. And
oh yeah, getting
so,
eaten alive by the grapplers.
So people had a lot of the striking trained people had a lot of emotional investment, and they started looking for rationalizations and justifications. Well, I wouldn't let them grab me. I'd just stick and move.
Right.
Or you wouldn't want to do that in a street fight against more than one person. And Hoyce's brother Horian, who was the leading force in the Gracie clan at that point, he had a column in Black Belt magazine, and he was very much into Jiu-jitsu is best. And, and we're proving it in, so he had a particular column where he went into these excuses that people were making. And for the, you wouldn't want to do that in a street fight, response, he says, you guys can't fight one person. What are you worried about more than one? And and that always gets the chuckle that you just gave me there. But actually, it reveals a deep gap in thinking. And he is thinking like, okay, like think of the early Gracie footage where like, oh, this guy he was talking trash about Gracie's jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, the dojo storming days, and
so here's a fight on the beach, and everyone's gathered around, and it is a quintessential young male ritual hierarchical combat fight. And but my answer is, well, if it's more than one, guess what? I'm using weapons. So in my thinking, there's the answer.
Yes.
There's the answer. I'm going back to that fight I was telling you about in Chiapas. The weapon that I had was I knew nothing about fighting, but I knew I was motorcycling, the length of Mexico many times in those years. You're alone on a Mexico in the interior of Mexico. It just occurred to me, probably a good idea to have some sort of equalizer. And then in those days, the belt, well, here, I can't really show there, but the belts were pretty thick. And so a buckle for it, I had a particular belt buckle that you could grab in a way that it made an outstanding brass knuckles. And so I just had it in my back right pocket so I could just reach back there and, it was readily available. And so when these 4 guys were chasing us up the street, I was able to do the rear guard action with this thing in my hand. Basically they didn't want to penetrate my bubble, and that's how we got to the police. And that's when they broke off saying, let's go to the car for the pistol. And so, because my thinking came from New York street crime, 3 junkies chasing me, these 4 guys in Mexico, that's why it occurred to me to have that answer to Horian's question. And so it seemed to me the question that was presented in this debate about why don't we see this in the cage, I broke it down to 2 primary reasons. One, you will do in the adrenal state what you have tested in the adrenal state. If you have tested your martial skills in the context of a particular combat sport that doesn't allow clinching, you're not going to be, like if you're familiar with boxing or, Muay Thai has a certain, through the plumb position, there's some clinching. But, the striker's game, if you're not familiar with a guy who's going to do a double leg and takedown, you're not familiar with that. So no matter what the problem is, you're going to do boxing. If you are a judo guy, no matter what the problem is, you're going to do judo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So why aren't people with the Filipino skills, I asked myself, applying these skills empty hand? And so I was looking at the Dog Brother experience, which, we were the place for these skills to be tested. Is in those days, most people were fighting single stick. And so it was very hard to first of all, most Filipino martial arts guys were not the guys doing the fighting. The gene pool that liked the actual fighting was going into Muay Thai, was going into boxing, going into judo, was going into jiu-jitsu, was going into wrestling where it was very physical and hands-on. Whereas the gene pool that was going into the Filipino arts were guys who enjoyed working with the stick. And that certainly, in a certain sense, it turned into what I call puff toad syndrome. Look at what I can do with the stick. Stay back. I'm dangerous. Puff toad. But, oh, this is too dangerous to do for real. And, but then when, well, come on down to a Dog Brothers gathering. So it became on tested material. So if somebody like that were ever provoked, and out of their 6 responses to danger, they're not likely to choose the fight one. They're going to, if they connect to fighting at all, they're going to connect to something that they've tested in the adrenal state. And the other half of the answer is, I said, if you're fighting one stick. So first of all, most Filipino martial art practitioners had not tested that skill set in the adrenal state. And then the second half of it is that much smaller group that had tested themselves in the adrenal state, it was overwhelmingly single stick.
Right.
Whereas,
not as much of the double stick.
Whereas coming out of my knee injury is when I really began dedicating myself to double stick. I think I have a genetic disposition in that direction. My mother is a lefty. And, like I used to make some pocket change when I was in college, gambling at ping pong and shooting pool, where I would play left-handed until the money got bigger. And then I would go back to right hand, It's
very Inigo Montoya of you.
Yeah. Crafty, we might even say. But so, and what occurred to me as I was developing, because one of the questions I asked myself was, well, where's all the damn triangles in the footwork? A lot of people was just kind of lean in, lean out, surging forward. And the only triangle I could think of for single stick, so getting to where my feet can be seen, was to go like this. And that was the only triangle I could think of. And, clearly I said to myself, there's got to be a lot more than that. And part of the problem there was in that thinking, as a right-handed fighter, I had to fight with my right foot forward, because if I were left foot forward, my front side is going to get lit up because my stick is back here. Later on, what Arlen, Salty Dog, brought to the game was having the tip forward. And this is a structure in DBMA we call the Salty Dog, because he is the one who really led the way on this. So you can pick up all of the angles from here and then do some very Crafty-like stuff. Because he brought the Crafty into the game to counter the Brazilian Jiu-jitsu that I was mixing into things, and that as Eric saw me do that, Eric was doing it, but at the time he in Santa Fe didn't have access to Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, so he was bringing the Crafty Krabong. But at that time, I didn't know about how to fight with the other foot forward, what we call the off lead. But I said, well, if I have a stick in each hand, it doesn't matter which foot is forward. So now I have not twice as many triangles, but 4 times as many triangles. I have right, 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 left, 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 right. And so that really opened a lot of doors for me. So with the coordinations that I had been building over the years with my training under Guro Asano, that's where I feel I really came into my own as a fighter. And Eric was on sabbatical, Arlen was on sabbatical, and so I was the only one of the, the 3 co-founders who was, carrying the flag at the Dog Brother gatherings in that era. And I feel that between my double stick and my mixing in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which has to be modified in the context of Dog Brother fight and the weaponry fight, I like to think that I represented well for the tribe. And so I had the double stick experience in the Adrenal state. So I retired from fighting at the age of 48, which would be the year 2000. And shortly thereafter, Rico Chiapparelli, who was the head coach at the Raw Gym, which at that time was one of the top MMA gyms in the world. You had Frank Trigg, Vladimir Matushenko. Rico was 2-time world wrestling champion. Waleed Ishmael, a young Lyoto Machida, serious players.
Those are serious people, yeah.
And Rico invited me to come up there. I met him over at Higgins School, and there was a training in the back room, and he was intrigued by how, when playing hand game, I was starting to do some of my, so he invited me over. And so that's where I was on that mat. And these guys could have smeared me, and a lot of pros and experienced amateur MMA guys in there, they could have smeared me. I was in my early 50s. But when they dialed it down to my level, and they were intrigued by what I was doing. And so there's nice words from Frank Trigg. There's nice words from Rico himself on the Kali Tudo DVD. And so that was the beginning of the Kali Tudo material. And so now DBMA has the real contact stick fighting, the Kali Tudo, which is where we adrenalize the weaponry movements for empty hands. And that interfaces with the die less often material, the interface of gun, knife, and empty hand. So when I fight empty hand, in an MMA context, my movements are still very much double stick movements. But what I'm doing there is a different idiom of movements. So I can be pretending to do the generic stuff. But when I shift structures, in the moment you shift structures, that forces the other guy to go back to the beginning of his OODA loop. And so there's some things in the footwork, which are very Kali, and the thinking, and the way of the striking is different. My striking, when I shift into this modality, it does not retract. And that most people go, huh? And when they see it, they sort of go, huh? And so when it's working, now the other guys are like, fuck you, you old man, smash, smash. I mean, there's plenty of people who can do that. I don't claim, there's, the list of people who can beat me is substantial. I'm a 68-year-old man with the injuries that I have. Life is life. But I think on the other hand, I think there's a lot of people I could surprise.
Right.
And so
gotta save that one in the tank.
Yeah. So I ain't as young as I once was, but I'm as young once as I ever was, as Toby Keith says. So those are the 3 basic areas of DBMA. And so it started out as just a real contact stick fight, Dog Brothers real contact stick fighting method. But over the years, it's evolved to have the Kali Tudo, which is my pun blending on the Brazilian term of Vale Tudo, which most Americans pronounce Vale Tudo. Vale in Portuguese meaning valid total. Vale Tudo, valid total meaning anything goes. That was the original rules of the UFC. And I forgot to mention, then there's the story about the UFC asking us to be a special event between the semifinals and the finals, and that's how when they broke off from doing that, that's when Art Davey invited me to be a judge at UFC 10. There's a whole bunch of stories there, but so DBMA it evolved, and so yeah, I have a link on the a thread on the public forum where I go through the differences. So anybody coming to Dog Brothers, you don't have to be involved in my Dog Brother martial arts. The two are distinct. In the Dog Brothers, I'm the guiding force. And then, as far as Dog Brother martial arts go, that's my system, and I am the grand poobah. And so finally, I got to the answer to your question, I hope.
That's all right. It's sometimes it takes a little bit to get there, but you did come back around. Well, I guess the other thing that I, sort of the purpose of this podcast is, at what point did you decide to step off the beaten path? I mean, you were talking about law school and going into the law, and then we started talking about stick fighting. So at some point in there, things diverged, and that's really what I'm interested in.
Yeah. I mentioned dropping out of college for a few years, and I was doing construction work. My father had been a builder, and so he opened the door for me, to get in the union. And it says, that's where I was making some pretty decent money, and that's where I bought my motorcycle and started riding down to Mexico and stuff like that. And after about 3 years of that, I was kind of done with that. And in addition to being a builder, he was a banker. And so he says, at the bank, when we're thinking of promoting somebody to a high level position, we have them take a battery of psychological tests. Because he had read this book called The Peter Principle, which says in an organization, somebody rises to their level of incompetence. As long as they're doing a good job, they're going to get promoted, and they get promoted until they're no longer doing a good job, and that's where they come the rest. So the guy could be a great salesman, but that doesn't mean he's going to be a good manager of the sales force. And so he says, I will spring for this battery of psychological tests. And so for 3 days, I took this battery of psychological tests. And, one of the things they said was I had an unusually high tolerance for conflict. And, and
really?
I imagine that.
Go figure.
Yeah. And New Yorker, I think that's probably, if I made a small political comment, I mean, part whatever anybody may think of President Trump, I think part of his problem was, and interacting with people outside of New York, is he's a New Yorker. And, there's the old joke about, how many New Yorkers does it take to change a light bulb? I don't know. How many? Answer: none of your fucking business.
It's about as New York as it gets.
Yeah, so New Yorker, and then within the spectrum of New Yorkers, high tolerance for conflict, and I aced the analytical reasoning, and so they said, well, law would be a good fit for you. But what they missed was, at that point, I was doing concrete construction work. So in terms of, well, would you rather do this or that, which is a big part of the test, they missed my physicality, because I was already getting my expression of physicality every day as a concrete carpenter, which is some very physical work. And so as I got to law school, I was just really restless, and like I like the mental exercise, but it was very unphysical life. And so I did law for a year in Washington, D.C., passed the bar, and moved out to California, and went into real estate with my then brother. We've parted ways. Irrelevant to details. But along the way, I just, that's where I discovered the Kali Academy and got more and more involved. And at the time, my brother and I, we were doing some small syndications, and so I piled up a bit of money there, and just started spending more and more time with martial arts. And I was on the Inosanto path. Vunak and I was with Vunak 84 to 86, I think. And I stayed with Inosanto and the Kali Academy, which then closed and became the Inosanto Academy, and so forth. But I'd stayed with Inosanto along the way, and just kept working with Inosanto as I was also developing the Dog Brothers thing, and it just sort of grew. And so my joke is, I used to be a lawyer, but then I went for the big bucks in martial arts. I went for the big bucks in stick fighting. Ooh,
yeah. quick path to wealth right there. That's much easier.
Yeah. So did I answer your question?
Yeah. That was, that's something that, I think that a lot of people when they start down a path like something like law school or any kind of a professional field, they kind of feel so trapped in it, especially once they're used to whatever the money that you're making in that field is, that the thought of just throwing that away and jumping into this flight of fancy of teaching martial arts and going down this rabbit hole life is probably completely mind-blowing to some people. And I think that it's something that full contact stick fighting might not be everyone's path, but everyone has a path they could take,
Yeah, when I was lawyering in Washington, there's certain parts of it that were fun. As a young attorney from a good law firm, I was certainly considered very eligible and desirable, and so dating life was very good.
Oh, I'm sure.
But moment of memory there. But as I looked around the law firm, it's like, there's no one here, as I was looking at the older attorneys and, the partners and so forth, do I really want to be this person 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And the answer was no. So my next step was to then go into the real estate, my legal background, to understand how to structure a syndication, was relevant. My stepfather had been in real estate tax shelter syndications and so forth. So I had a certain, courage to go down that path for a while. And, there were a few years it was doing very well. So I was able to build up some money, which is now dissipated given my choice to go into stick fighting. But, that's part of what gave me the courage to go where I had to go. But basically, in a certain sense, I didn't have a choice. I couldn't continue. I mean, I couldn't sit in a chair that much. I couldn't deal with the people. Basically, as a lawyer, you're, my shorthand for it is you're rent an asshole. You're an asshole for hire. I'm having a problem with this person, regardless of whether you think I'm right or wrong. Here, take this money and go fight this person on my behalf.
Right. Rent an asshole is pretty good.
And, it just, I really enjoyed the intellectual side of law school. And I was, Columbia is a pretty serious school, and, it's around some very, high level minds. My constitutional law professor was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and, certainly, I did not disagree on much, did not agree on much of anything.
What? No.
But I got to say, she played fair with me. And it didn't surprise me later on when she and Justice Scalia were good friends. So I could disagree with her on, I remember challenging her on National League of Cities v. Usury, which was the federal government was trying to impose minimum wage requirements on state employees of state governments. And we disagreed on that one. And we disagreed on the Equal Rights Amendment, which, like people after class, I can't believe, that you challenged her on the Equal Rights Amendment, because she was already being, the buzz was, that she was future Supreme Court. And, but, she played fair with me. And, so I was around good minds. So I really enjoyed the intellectual side of it, but just basically, when you're, I thought, oh, I'm going international law. And one of the cases I worked on was an Iranian claims tribunal case. So, there's some good intellectual work there, but most of the work is just, ugh.
Right. Well, I think your shirt kind of says it all, and it's the thing that speaks very much, I think, to a lot of the guys that become involved in the Dog Brothers, and it's the walk as a warrior for all your days. And I don't think there's a lot of maybe some lawyers can view themselves that way, but I don't think most do. And I think for those of us out there that have a regular, quote unquote, boring day-to-day job, it's part of the battle, to keep ourselves on that path to walk as a warrior for all of our days. And, I hope that having you on here has exposed maybe some people that weren't as familiar with what you do to what you do. So,
well, here, anyways, so let me close with a little story. Sure. They're the big names, Manning Lacosta in the Filipino martial art world, but several years ago, there was a story in LA, and there was a guy, Filipino guy. According to the article, at the time, he was 80 years old and 125 pounds. You know, a lot of Filipinos are pretty small. And he and his wife came home to their apartment, and it was an apartment on the second floor where the stairs were external to the building. And comes in, the doors open, comes in, and there is some 16-year-old teenage kid robbing the place. And the kid, according to the article, was I think 165 pounds. So you got, let's see, 80 to 16, you know, what's that, 64-year difference, and 125 to 165 pounds, 40-pound difference, huge difference. And he just happened to have a pipe behind the front door. And he picked it up, and he went at the, you know, wanted this robber kid in his apartment and knocked him down and put a hold on him. And the police arrive, and they see him, they got this stick cranked on this kid. It's like, hey, drive. It's like, hey, no, this is my place. And, you know, so he became a, you know, big hero. He was on the local news and this and that. And in the article, there's a picture. He's there at the bottom of the stairs, the external stairs to the apartment. And he is standing there. He's got, you know, his foot up, you know, like this a bit. And he's proudly, you know, the pipe is, you know, here like this. And he's very proud. And his wife is, you know, even smaller than him. She's there very, and in a very proud way, she's resting her hand on his shoulder. And just what a magnificent way to live. That even at 80 years old, you know, when someone, you know, that you are a warrior for all your days, and that is how your woman feels about you. What a magnificent way to live. Or I could be a lawyer.
Wow.
The choice for me is clear. That makes sense?
I agree with you fully. I feel that that's almost not a choice at all.
Yeah, well, right. You know, like I said earlier, I didn't have a choice. I had to do this. And so now I am at I need a moment of advertising.
Oh, yes. Please do. Please do. Tell people where to find you.
So for people who like what I do, there's the Dog Brother Martial Art Association, $30 a month or $300 a year, close to 2,000 vid lessons now. You know, a lot of backyard stuff, and very active forum. I'm there, available all the times. A lot of associations, there's a name, but, you know, like you get into the association, well, he's not really around. You know, I'm there, I'm participating, and, you know, there's video, you know, student, you know, one of the member will put up a video, and I'm there responding, giving some coaching and so forth. So, you know, it's a real interaction. You know, the technology has really opened doors that it's possible to interact at a distance because of the visual and the audio that's possible. And we have a camp coming up July 24th through the 26th. I hear Vigilance Combatives. So you see stuff in the background there. Here, let me adjust the camera a bit. You see above my head there that, you know, these are airsoft. You know, we have the airsoft for the Glock 19, and that's an AR airsoft. So, you know, firearms are part of the training. My partner, Sean, he has 2 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart from, you know, his service in Iraq. He's going to be teaching some table manners material, which I think is very innovative. A lot of us were just used to, are you ready? Are you ready? Da 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 da. And, you know, some people have heard the story. You know, I had a day in Pendecker Paul Dutoir's classes. I need a volunteer, Mark. And he calls me up, and he gets face to face with me like this. He says, okay, do something. And I realized in that moment, I had nothing for that kind of a start to a fight. And all of a sudden, something like this made a whole bunch more sense than it did to my, you know, my mind at that point. And there's different fights, and there are problems in life that start with somebody, you're seated and somebody stands over you. There are problems in life that start where you're both at the table, either across or at 90 degrees to each other. There are problems that start in a vehicle. You know, we have a fight vehicle. You know, these are, you know, different kinds of problems. And, you know, so Sean's been to meetings in Iraq, and, you know, think of the complexities of Iraq with the different tribes, the Sunnis, the Shias, and the different tribes, and the shifting alliances. You know, there was, you know, the Sunni rising, you know, as part of the response to the surge, and da 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 da. So think about being at a meeting in this part of the world, and everybody in the room has killed at least one person. Everybody in there is a killer, and it's a meeting, and you don't know which way the meeting's going to go. Everybody's smiling, but what's the real heart? And so this is material that's been tested at a very high level. And there have been problems where everybody's in the car together and a problem gets started. So he brings a very special and very rare kind of experience. And so combatives is across the continuum. This is not martial arts and crafts. This is not, we have the ritual space, but we also have outside the ritual space. And so the theme of this year's camp is dealing with a cranky crowd of scurrilous scum, regardless of what your politics are. Mine are well known. But we have seen a lot of problems in our country this past year where there's mob action, and so it's not one versus one. There's what I call the cranky crowd of scurrilous scum, and then there's a level higher. It starts out with what I call the pant hooters. Think of chimpanzees. It's just kind of a lot of shouting and mindlessness, but not the intense there. Then the cranky crowd of scurrilous scum is you got that guy with the skateboard looking to sneak up on you. Maybe a bit of teamwork. And then there's within the crowd, there's the pack of jackals where they're there as a team with purpose. And they have tactics and strategies that they've worked out and, perhaps have already used. And so the theme of this year's camp is dealing with a cranky crowd of scurrilous scum. So that'll be in Aberdeen, North Carolina, fly into Raleigh. Aberdeen is the west edge of Fort Bragg, which is, for those who know, there's a lot of special forces people and, very special training, a lot, training there. So there's going to be a lot of interesting people there. There's Sean's going to have some speakers in the evening who, bring a special background of experience to the conversations that they share and so forth. So there's the association, there's the camp in Aberdeen, just fly into Raleigh, we'll help you out. This week, we should be having the registration form and the promo clip going up. You'll get a chance to hear Sean explaining some of what he brings and some footage of some of his ideas and like that. And as we say around here sometimes, the adventure continues.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you one more time, sir. And thank you everybody for listening.
All right, the adventure continues.
Hell yeah.